Okay, it's all the way on. Oh my God.
I'm so happy to see you after all of the like hours that
I
we've been working
know.
together.
I know. It's been a
Um,
whirlwind.
Tell me the blue background, is that in your house?
Yeah, this is actually my home office, and of course, being a designer, I had a painter come in and paint my wall. So it's like a beautiful wall mural. It reminds me of something like semi-precious stone.
Oh yeah, and also makes for all of those really nice photos that you've got. That's
Of course, of course. Yeah.
so how is your life doing? There is so much going on. Obviously, you're in the States. We're up here in
Yeah.
Canada. We are more, yes, we're experiencing it, but we are experiencing it more as witnesses more than we are like embedded in it. So
Mhm.
how are things going for you?
Oh my God. I can't spit everything all out in one. It's just too much. We need more wine. We need a lot of wine for that. I mean, outside of the fact that I have, 3 kids, I have my husband, I adopted a rabbit. And that's part of my little, coping mechanism. So, yeah, I had to pivot my business because I'm in the wedding and events industry.
Yeah.
And I do like custom invitations, predominantly for weddings and things like that. Then, of course, I wrote the book. And then the pandemic happened, and the wedding industries and events industry sort of ended. So I had to pivot and like, okay, what am I going to focus on? And I decided to focus on my book sales. I started selling face masks because everybody needed face masks. So it's just like trying to figure out what to do. But at the same time, it's sort of the silver lining with this pandemic is that it offered me time to do some of the things that I've been wanting to do, but I never had the time to do it. So silver lining, I was able to redo my business website and it looks so much nicer now. It's just absolutely awesome. I did my personal website, so that was unbelievable. That was incredible too. A nice launch because then I get to showcase myself as an author and all of that good
Yeah.
stuff and just really put the focus on me and my book and everything. But um, the recent events, the things that have happened recently has been incredible because yes, when I launched my book back on my birthday, February 29th, my leap year birthday, the whole intention was to, um, the wonderful thing about February 29th is like right in the middle of Black History Month and also Women's History Month. So I thought that it's so perfect that my birthday actually intersects between those 2 months, which is the primary focus of my book. So I thought this is just wonderful. So I launched it, and it was Amazon's bestseller for about a few weeks. So that was awesome. And then everything sort of died down because the pandemic, came about, and then you're just trying to figure out what you do. So I wasn't really focusing on trying to promote my book, all of the book tours that I really hoped to do and the book signings. I had to just put those aside because
Yeah.
you're still trying to just figure things out. And I actually lost a few family members already from COVID-19. Yeah. So that really sucked. So all of that's going on, and then we saw the situation. I know you guys are in Canada, so I don't know how much you see too much, as you were saying, but we had the Ahmaud Arbery, who got killed, and then we were still dealing with that shock, and then George Floyd
Yeah,
happened.
it was this waterfall effect, wasn't it?
It's just I just couldn't understand it, and so I every time I see things or hear things of injustice or prejudice or racism, I have never really honestly sat down to watch the whole scene because I'm one of those people who take on too much of the people's problem. I just I observe everything, like everything. I take everything in. So I never really paid attention, but everybody kept talking to me about George Floyd, like, oh my God, it's as though you were psychic. You were so prophetic. Did you hear about this? Literally what you wrote in your book is exactly what happened to him. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I wasn't really paying too much attention, and I really didn't want to look. I didn't really want to pay too much attention because, once again, I know myself and I don't want to take on that weight or feeling really sad. But once they were telling me about this police officer who literally sat on his neck, I had to go look at the video.
Yeah.
And so I looked at the video and watched the whole thing in entirety. And I'm going to try not to get emotional because I am still recovering. But it was traumatizing. I was completely traumatized because for the first time I had to pay attention. I watched the whole entire situation unfold, and as a mom, and I'm a mother of three, and I have all three of them are Black. My husband is Black. I am Black. I just kept thinking there's no way that even though his mom was dead, that she wouldn't hear her own son's cry.
Yeah.
Because there's a connection between a mother and a child like no other, right? And there was I was completely heartbroken. I was completely traumatized. My concern for my son and my my husband and my daughters too, because we've also had situations with Black women being killed, just heightened, and I just felt completely hopeless. The whole powerful message behind my book, Get Your Foot Off My Neck, is supposed to empower. It was supposed to kind of tell people of color, particularly women, to not allow naysayers or anyone who try to oppress you. Do not allow anyone to try to oppress you. And the focus of my book, when I talk about it, it's part memoir and it's part self-help business book. So you get a little bit of both. And I felt the need to talk about my personal aspects so that people could understand how I came to this point, to this end point. So that's why I went into my own personal life, and then I really go into businesses of lessons learned, so that people hopefully can take some things and not make those same mistakes as well in their business decisions. So yeah, that whole George Floyd thing was traumatizing, and now actually when you Google Get Your Foot Off My Neck, the first thing that literally pops is my book right next to George Floyd. And so what has happened since this whole situation, I'm Nigerian-American. I was born here in Chicago, Illinois, but my parents are Nigerian, so I'm first generation. And one of my husband's friends happened to be working for a publishing company in Nigeria, and he is a printer as well. And he immediately, called and he said, "Oh my God, this is just unreal." I received so many DMs, so many calls, so many emails, like, I hope you've copyrighted your book. I hope you've, and remember we talked about that, Megan, about should I copyright you? I wasn't sure, we were kind of going through that process, and thank God I made the decision to copyright. So it doesn't seem, of course, it shows, it's pretty obvious that it came out before George Floyd, but still protecting that. Yeah. So, but the publisher in Nigeria is going to be publishing my book. They have decided to take on my book, and by the end of this month, I will have, it's going to start distributing in Nigeria. So now I'm going to be an international author. So that's, yes, it was very painful to watch. It was, I'm still trying to recover, but what is also interesting about this whole situation, somebody told me, you should sell T-shirts because everybody's having, the I Can't Breathe shirts, Black Lives Matter shirts and all of that, and you should totally do shirts. I never considered ever doing T-shirts. I was still going through a lot of the emotional pain and just reliving, watching that video over and over again. And I felt some kind of way. I am happy that the attention is back on my book again, but at the same time, I feel some kind of weird, like I don't want to. If he hadn't died, maybe I would feel good about, using this opportunity to promote the book. But everyone who have been talking to me have been encouraging me that your book is uplifting, your book is empowering, your book is inspiring, that you were able to overcome despite all the bias, the racism, and all of that stuff. So go ahead, put that book out. We all know that you did this prior to the situation that's happening. Maybe the whole intention of you putting this book out is because of what this movement that has started. And so that made me feel good. And I said, you know what? I have to do something. I have to be able to give in some type of way if I do decide to do this t-shirt, so that it can go towards this movement, because this has to stop. I have to do something. At least for my son, some people, because this is a new generation. He's only 8 years old. And so it was weird. I had last year, I totally forgot about it, but last year after watching When They See Us from Ava DuVernay, she directed it. She did an excellent.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're. Yeah. She directed this drama about what really happened with the Central Park Five. And so I watched that last year, and I was like, oh my God, I'm just so sick and tired of seeing these things over and over again. I need to, later in future, when I'm in my 50s and I'm making all this money, I am going to go ahead and start some kind of scholarship or some foundation for Black and brown boys, because I feel like there's a lot of things out there already for women, and we still need more stuff for women, but there's so much stuff now. They focus on women empowerment and learning and things like that, but I don't really see a lot of things for men, for Black men, and so I thought I'm going to start this, and I bought the domain. I came up with the idea of onyx, because when I think of onyx, onyx is a rock. It's a black rock. It's strong. And I thought that's really powerful. So I'm going to call it like Onyx Boys. So I decided to, so I bought the domains last year of onyxboy.org and onyxboy.com. And I said, I'm just going to put it there. I'm just going to keep it there for later use for some time. But now that this whole situation has started, I felt the prompting that I needed to just go ahead and accelerate that plan. So I'm going to start a foundation. Yes. And so a portion of the proceeds of this t-shirt that I'm selling for my book, Get Your Foot Off My Neck, will go towards this foundation that's going to support, Black and brown boys who would like to go into like the law enforcement type roles or law policy changing roles, because that's where I see how they can sort of disrupt the system of this racial injustice. I think that thank you. I see her listening. That's where I see that there could be some type of change. So I'm excited about that. So that makes me feel good about selling these teas, and I don't feel like I'm capitalizing on this whole movement to just sell t-shirts. These are not just empowerment t-shirts. These are t-shirts that are going towards a cause to actually make a change. So the bigger and bigger it gets, I definitely going to open this foundation. It could be bigger. Who knows? It could be even bigger. I don't know where it's going to take me, but I'm going to do everything I can to do my part to contribute towards making a change.
And I was thinking about when we were messaging last night about that thought about capitalism and stuff. And the funny part is that people's opinions about capitalization are like, it's so miseducated, right? Because the thought is that like the internet has like a line for you. This isn't like something that you're like, the reason your book is coming up is nothing because it's like, sure, you've got good SEO, but none of this was happening to be like, oh, I've got a catchphrase for you guys.
Right. So, I mean, it wasn't meant to be literal. It was about a mentality, but who would know that it would actually I have never, every time you would say that, it was always metaphoric. It was never, I mean, just to actually see it happen. And the crazy thing is, I had this right on the very first page of my book. I literally had the definition right at the forward. It wasn't even like the first chapter. Yeah, this is my forward that I described exactly what would happen in the future with George Floyd. So that was so eerie. I mean, everybody's like goosebumps, bumps, like I can't believe they were like, are you a witch or something? I'm like, no, because there's one thing to actually have that title, Get Your Foot Off My Neck, and I don't think it's like really. I got it from the Supreme Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's one of the Supreme Court justice here in the United States. So she had made a reference to basically oppressors and saying, oh, we're not asking you to. It was more about feminism and sexism in her workplace, being a woman who ends up being this judge. And she was saying something like, I'm not asking you to give me special treatment because I'm a woman. All I'm asking you is just to get your feet off our necks. And I said, whoa, that's so powerful. That's the name of my book. That's exactly my storyline. And so I changed it from, get their feet off our necks to get your foot off my neck.
Yeah.
And for it to relate to any woman, to any person of color who ever encountered any type of obstacle or oppression because of your sex, because you're a woman, because you're a black or a brown, or I think they have this racist comment even for for Asians, and they say they're like bananas or something like that, or something. They make some kind of nasty reference about their skin tone as well. So to just tell them like, no, get your foot off my neck so I can thrive, so I can breathe, so I can, just be me,
Yeah.
You don't. So that was the whole point of that. It's supposed to empower.
Yeah.
And
it's making me think about one of the first conversations we had when you're talking about the empowerment piece and how it's actually like the irony is uplifting of this. Yeah. It makes me think about we had the conversation. I think the subtitle originally for your book was Memoirs of an African-American.
It was of a black girl, creative or something. Yeah.
So, has anything changed for you? Because I was listening to your podcast that you did with Natalie Jill Fitness.
Yes.
And you were talking about the racism that you experienced even within your own Black community.
Yes.
And I was wondering, since the book has come out, have you had any has that shift from being like a Black girl creative or like the Nigerian, have you had any second thoughts about whether that was the right move, or did that change anything?
Oh, it was absolutely the right move, because it changed the sub tagline ended up being, Memoirs of a Nigerian-American Architect. Mm-hmm. And I felt it was important to talk about the fact that not only is she Black, but she's also a woman who goes into a white male dominated field. So I wanted people to say wow. And that's usually the type of expression that I normally get all the time when I tell people that I'm an architect. They would look at me like, oh, so now they want to know about me some more. They actually, it's very, it ends up being a conversation starter. People want to know about me and how did I go into architecture, and are you licensed or you're not licensed? What type of architectural, company? What are you doing? Are you doing schools, or you're doing courtrooms, or residential? So they want to see how articulate I sound. Some of them who are biased, or they want to see if I really have that knowledge, and they want to, fill me out and see if I sound intellectual. Exactly. If I sound intellectual or whatever, I'm like, okay, I'll entertain you. And I did it for almost 20 years. In fact, when I left architecture, I was working for the feds and the federal government, and I was the ADA accessibility officer, the regional 5. So the entire region, thank you. So the whole entire region, I was the go-to that will, a lot of people were scared of me because I review the drawings to make sure it's compliant with federal rules and regulations to make sure, and I was the only one. So it was kind of an important position because there was nobody else who was doing that. So people needed to refer to me for that particular region. Basically anywhere the Greater Lakes touched, which was like Michigan, Illinois, Minnesota, Indiana, Wisconsin, like all of the different, those states I took care of. So
big job.
I did a lot of, yeah, it was a big job, you know. Thank you. So I traveled a lot. I'm looking at the comments here. Yeah, I did a lot of traveling, and then it started to take a toll on me. But I have to admit, I had to constantly keep proving myself as a Black woman. You know, they would still question. You would still have people who would question me because they couldn't believe that I was in this position. And I did it for about 6 or 7 years before I decided to quit. And the only reason why I quit wasn't because I, you know, decided to give up on the nonsense that was going on. It was actually a personal reason. I had my 3rd child, and he was a preemie, and my whole priority just changed, you know, and I had him when I was 35. So I was like, I can't do this. I can't be a super mom and
wait, you're not
keep
27?
You know, I mean, well, technically I'm 11 years old because I'm a leap year baby, right?
Right.
Yeah. You know, but no, I'm 44, and people always think I'm in my 20s, but hey, Black don't crack, like for real. Okay, there's no wrinkles on his face here. I have some gray hair hidden, but you know.
Yeah, I'll have what you're having.
So
right?
that's the wonderful thing about having this skin tone, okay? Yeah. Did you feel the bias from the start? So being Nigerian-American, having to live in my formative years in Nigeria, I didn't experience any type of feeling or weird feeling or somebody making me feel some type of way. We never were taught or just that underlining or subtle feeling of bias or racism because everybody was Black in Nigeria, right? Everybody is Black. So there's never any type of feeling of discrimination at all because of color of skin. And so when I moved here back in 1988 and I was living in New York, that was my first sense of my Blackness. Like I didn't even realize that I needed to recognize the fact that I'm Black. Like I knew I was Black, but I didn't realize I needed to recognize that I am Black until I moved back here.
That's a really interesting distinction, isn't it? Like
yes. And so it was really interesting because I talk about this in my book. I could only really relate to the people, to the kids who were from the island. Maybe they were Jamaican or, you know, they were Haitian. I couldn't really relate to African Americans. They were pretty mean to me, but, you know, kids are mean anyway when you're in high school or middle school, but they were particularly mean to me. And I think it stems, unfortunately, from the narrative that they saw on TV in white America, that people coming from Africa were these people who lived in, you know, the villages, or they were very primitive, right? So you'll riding an elephant or living in the trees or something stupid, you know, they would call me a monkey, you know, make fun of me, they make fun of my body parts and all of that stuff. And I was just like, wow, you guys are so mean. And of course they're mean all across the board anyway. That's just kids in general. But the way they would say it was they targeted the fact that I was coming, even though I was American. It was such a confusing time because I was a teenager, you know, that just, and I know it's from watching the TV, you know, they were watching shows and they watch these infomercials of people with who were starving, and they had like kwashiorkor, which is like a disease with big stomach bellies and flies on their mouth. So just, and I'm like, I didn't even see this when I lived in Nigeria. I lived in the city. You know, we had a TV. We knew about Michael Jackson, and we watched Sesame Street. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. So, but coming, even just those formative years, even at that age of coming back at 12, typically most parents will come in the 70s, they would have their kids in America or London, and they would go back home with their kids, and then the kids, when they were college years or when it's time for them to go to college, they would go back to their birthplace for college. That's typical of Nigerians or whatever. But me coming here, I still, at 12, I still had this, I don't know how to explain this. I still ended up having that confidence that I realized that a lot of Black folks did not have here, because from generation to generation, they stem from, can you turn off comments so we can see Ola Morin? Somebody's saying that. Can you turn off comments so we can see Ola Morin? I don't know what that means. But the point I'm trying to make is that because I came from a place where I was not taught to put my head down, I wasn't taught to feel any type of way because of my skin, that was what sort of propelled me to kind of to have that confidence, so that when I received those buyers, I would look at them crazy, like, what are you talking about? Right. The whole intention is to succeed. The whole intention is to finish school. The whole intention is to go to college. The whole intention is to be an architect. So anytime I would hit those roadblocks, I would look at them like they were crazy, and I would just find another way to circumvent whenever they try to block me. But the difference between my mentality and the African-American mentality is that the African-American mentality comes from generation and generation of suppression, repression of, oppression. And so they were taught from generation to generation to put their head down and to not be confident of their skin, and to know that they're going to automatically have the bias. I didn't come from that. Right. I wasn't taught that, when you come back to America, guess what? You're going to deal with all of this because of your skin. Like, that was it was never taught. The goal is you're going to finish school, you're going to be either an architect, an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer. Those were really the only options that any Nigerian wanted you to be. And I find that most ethnic backgrounds, they all come from that same school of thought. So if you're Indian, or if you're Asian or South Asian, you usually have the same type of moral background. You're going to be a lawyer, a doctor, engineer. Yeah, you only have those options, And because I had this artistic ability, my mom was like, okay, you don't have to be an engineer. You can be an architect, okay? You can be an architect. So it's still kind of like in that same realm. But you really didn't have a lot of options. That was what Nigerian parents paid for you to go to school to become. You had to do those white-collar positions. So coming here, I never thought of any way else. Like, there was no other option. This is what I was going to be. So when I hit those roadblocks, I just didn't realize that it was racism. I was just like, why are you doing that? And after many years and I, being here, then you realize, oh, that's racism. Oh, yeah. You're like, oh, so that's what it is. And so then it clicked,
And does that, like, when that, like, how old were you when that clicked for you?
I would say when I went to college, I would say when my professor, who was a white Jewish guy, I remember he was Jewish because he wore one of the little like hats that they put on, and he told me he doesn't understand why I am going into architecture, and he was going to fail me. And he was going to fail me. He just told me right up front, and this is early 90s. Yeah, early 90s. So I decided to withdraw because I figured it's better to get a W than to get an F.
Right.
Yeah, and I just made sure that, and all that taught me was not to stop and give up. All that taught me was like, I'm going to make sure that I do some research on who the professor is teaching certain courses, so that I make sure that if the Black kids, the Black college students complain about that person being difficult or being a bigot or whatever, I'll make sure that I'm not going to take that person's course. So I just found other ways to to circumvent it so I can still achieve my goal.
And do you find that there's like an ignorance so you've got discrimination coming from African Americans, and then did you experience like being put in a box and a label from people who just couldn't differentiate the difference between like coming from overseas versus?
Honestly, it was for me when I was a teenager. It was confusing. There was much confusion for me because first of all, you're a teenager, so it's already a confusing time. You're going through all of the puberty and all of that good stuff. You're very hormonal. I'm a female. So I'm still trying to forget. To get rid of my pimples that I'm getting all on my forehead. And, I'm hoping I'll get a boyfriend, and then dealing with all of this other nonsense that was going on, I don't know. What was your question?
Oh, my question was, are you getting discriminated against, from, white America or, your professors and stuff, putting you in a category of, blanket, are you Black and therefore equals discrimination?
Yes, so it's really, right, so it's really interesting. I think that when I got into the work field and started working with, in this white, I had the opportunity, I learned a skill set that a lot of the golden boys, they call them, or the good old boys, they call them, didn't understand, which was AutoCAD. And AutoCAD is a drawing software to lay out floor plans and to do construction documents for architecture, for architecture. So for me, it wasn't necessarily the bias that I was receiving so much with the college professors, but when I was now working, I would hear the conversations would go something like, and this is what happens when you're at home. People answer the doors when you're doing a live. Okay. So sorry. Those are the things that happen. JJ, I am doing a live. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
My Amazon package is here.
But it's okay. People live on. Okay. I didn't forget. You see these things on the TV all the time where the kids are coming in the middle and interrupting, but whatever. So it's life.
Yeah.
But and they would say things like, of course they see me. When they see me, I'm Black, and then when I actually start talking, they're like, "Oh, you sound." It's those subliminal way of bias. They're like, "You sound so articulate. You sound so different from the." I guess they're trying to say the other Black people, right? So I'm like, what do you mean? What by that?
Everybody I know talks like this.
Yeah, I'm like, what are you talking about? That I sound more articulate, I'm more proper than the other Blacks.
Yeah.
So just those type of things, those little nuances were happening. I remember I worked at Starbucks, and at Starbucks I was the only Black female at headquarters. I was designing the international coffee shops in their international markets when I lived in Seattle. Because I think I told you that I lived there, right? I think I told you.
Yeah,
I used to live in Seattle, right? Yeah, and so
remarkable for only being 27 years old. How?
Yeah, right. I've been everywhere. You want me to run down all the places I've been? I've lived so many places. It's ridiculous. And not to even talk about all the places I've traveled, So, right. But I traveled so that I can. I think it's so interesting to see different society, the way they do things, their culture, and you realize we're just all human beings, and we all still have those similarities. And even though we have those little differences, there's still, for the most part, we all have that same commonality. It's just we just want to live, and we want to live a good life. We want to make money and just be comfortable, and if you have children, you want to be able to just make sure your children are going to be safe and be able to go out in the world and be good people and good citizens of the world. That is those same commonalities every human wants, for themselves, just to be better. So.
And what a gift to have your, family note, instill that. I mean, from knowing your story and stuff, I know that a lot of your confidence and your self-assurance is purely self-assurance. But
yes.
But you've also at some point you've just picked up people along the way that have reassured you of that confidence, right? And what a opportunity, not an opportunity, but experiencing what you have and with other families and stuff, especially knowing that the African American, it's a generational, it's what we're talking about it being systemic, but it is in the household as well.
It's in the household as well. And I do have to say that I wouldn't say so much that I received any type of, it wasn't racism from African Americans per se. There's more of I think there's a difference between being ignorant because the information, they were not fed information, the correct information about their own kind, because we are the same.
Right.
We are literally the same, but so they're going by what they were shown living here in the United States. I received bad treatment from my own kind, meaning Nigerians, because I say that you will get all of that sense when you read my book. I talk about family members and how they treated me terribly, because and this is your own family, and I thought this was just so puzzling. If you are in your own home with your own people and you do not feel safe or protected, what is there? Where else where do you go? Where do you go when your own people are not treating you well? I mean, that's pretty horrible. And that's what I talk about that's what I mean when I reference internalized racism. Mm-hmm. When you in your own home do not feel loved or you don't feel wanted. These are relatives. These are Nigerians who are Black, who were being biased and treating me terribly when I came here because of circumstances.
Clarify what that is then, or how do you just what's an example of what that can look like? So your own, explain that for us.
When I moved, the story begins. It's very tragic. My father died before I was even born. So my mom, who is an immigrant who comes here for college, and she's a newlywed, a young, woman of 24. And my dad is here. They're both here. They're just poor. They're not living. They just came here to go to college, and then go back home. And she's pregnant, and my father dies. Just no particular reason. He just sleeps and he doesn't wake up. And my mom has to go back home to Nigeria because she has no family member. The only family member died, which was my dad. So she goes back. And then coming back here to from Nigeria back to America because I was dealing with a skin condition, and my mom realized that staying in Nigeria is just not, it's just not going to work for me. And then having me stay with her sister at the time in New York. And unfortunately, her sister is in a really abusive marriage. Her husband cheats on her. He is an alcoholic, all of that stuff is going on. So, so there's a lot of abuse going on in that household. And then I'm not even their child. And so, but I end up being more of a babysitter / almost servant, and I don't know how to really articulate this, but I tell you this for sure. A lot of Nigerians, young Nigerians who are born here, or even if they were not born here, but they come here in their youth, in their teenage youth, and they're living with relatives, not their actual parents, but relatives, they have the same similar story of abuse with their family members. I do not understand why. I don't know. The only explanation is that we are not blood related. Like we are blood, but we are not. They are not our parents, and they take advantage of the opportunity that we are here, and we are, green in the ears, like we don't know anything. We're fresh out of water, and they take advantage of that. They take advantage of that, and I do not know if it stems from the fact that they have been here and they've had to suffer, and they've taken out the frustration out on us here, but the story is similar. I wish there's a whole breakdown that I don't even really narrate in my book, because my book is a quick read. But man, if I really dump all of this, all the details, it's just so much. And then I leave that situation to go to move to Virginia to stay with my stepfather's cousin, thinking that it was going to be a better situation, because not only am I dealing with abuse in New York, but we were living in Flatbush, Brooklyn, and at a time when it's just not that great, and there are drugs in the elevator floors, like just a lot of, it's just not a good environment at all.
Where am I?
I'm serious, it's just really bad. So I go to Chesapeake, Virginia. I actually finished high school in Chesapeake, Virginia. And the school that I went to was predominantly white, but the neighborhood that we were living in was black. But here I am living with my stepfather's cousin, and once again, it's just treatment of I am probably like damaged goods because I'm coming from New York, Brooklyn, and so he's feeling like whatever bad treatment that he's giving me couldn't be nearly as bad as it was in New York. And so he was stingy, and stingy to a whole different point. If I used the bathroom, if you peed, you can't flush the toilet. Just crazy stuff like that, unless you did a number 2, okay? Or he would cook expired food, like food that, been there forever. And his wife, who was African American, not Nigerian, would conveniently take her kids to go get lunch or dinner or some fast food, but I was stuck at home to eat the nasty expired food that he was giving me. Just things like that, or he would say things that you would think that a white person who was racist would say. Because I remember on graduation day, and this is my happiest moment, my mom brought some red roses to give to me on graduation day. And I remember that his remark was not congratulations. His remark was, "Oh, and we thought you were not going to graduate." And I'm like, what? And so who is we?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I made honor rolls.
Yeah,
I'm like, who is the we? I made honor rolls. I was one of the best students. I made all 8s. I don't even know what you were referencing. So it was just those type of little things, and I don't understand. And at one point he stopped giving me, he was getting money from my dead dad. He was receiving Social Security from my aunt's husband, the one that I lived with in New York. And so every month he would receive, I don't know, 200 or something. So he wasn't even taking care of me for free. He was taking care of me because there was an agreement that money would be sent. And I think for whatever reason, the money started coming. And so he decided to cut all, like my allowance and all the things that I was getting to take care of my hair, just to take care of myself, to buy stuff, just things that I needed. So just things like that. It was just crazy. I remember I went to Nigeria because my mom used to work for Nigerian Airways, so I used to fly all the time to Nigeria. And I ended up getting malaria, which is pretty common to get malaria. And here in America, they didn't really know how to treat that. And so I ended up, he had me go to the hospital, and I was at the hospital for 3 days, and not once did he come and visit. None of them came to check on me, and I'm like 15 or 14 years old, and they just dumped me at the hospital for 3 days. My mom is all the way in Nigeria. She's all the way in Africa. Like, the only person who really loves me, that she doesn't know they don't know if I'm going to die. They just left me at the hospital.
Because you're from New York.
Of course, I'm from New York. I'm 14 years old. So there's just so many other things that I know I probably repressed because it is that's the way I sort of coped. You know, the one particular episode that I write in the book, I don't want to give away all of the good stuff in my book, but he would always go to Old Country Buffet, which is like this chain
Oh
buffet
yeah.
food restaurant. Yeah, you know, I don't know if it still exists, you know, Old Country Buffet. And I still enjoy going there because I love to get in the Cinnabons. You know, this is back in the early 90s. You know, and once the money started coming, you know, he actually had the audacity, didn't say anything to me. We ride every Friday or Saturday, we would take one day of the week to go to this restaurant. And I was always looking forward to eating my butt off. Just eat all you can,
Yeah.
right? And he, as we were getting ready to go, and he was like, "Do you have any Old Country Buffet money?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? You know, I don't have any money." And he was like, "Well, then you're not, you know, then that if you don't have any Old Country Buffet money, then you can't have no Old Country Buffet." So guess what? They left me in the car,
Shut up.
and him and his family went to go eat. And I just sit there in the car, and I was probably 14 or 15. I just sit in the car, wait for them to eat, and then we drove back home. And the next time they were going to Old Country Buffet, since I knew I didn't have any money, I just said, I'm not going. I'm not going, you know, with you, and I just stayed home. Those type of things was really traumatizing for me. I didn't realize that even till today, I question if it actually happened. You
Right.
know, when your brain is such a powerful yet very vulnerable thing, and people do incredible things to cope, and you would only hope that you don't end up going having mental problems because some people can't
Yeah.
handle these type of
It's
things, and they have mental problems. But for me, I just I start to question it. Did it happen? Because I blocked it.
right. And did writing, when you wrote the book, did that pull anything out for you?
It started pulling those, and I remember having to ask my mom, like, I don't know if this happened. And she said, yes, it did, because you told us when it happened back then. And so that was the only way that I could keep on writing because it started coming up. And I was realizing that this is too much. And that's part of the reason why I had to keep it short. I didn't want to write all the stuff that I went to in detail because I started remembering it as I was writing and I was reliving the whole situation and it was so much for me. It's like throwing up, you know?
Yeah, and and sometimes like, and I think what makes your book so like punchy feels like it discredits it, but the idea of like knowing what to keep out versus
Yeah.
what to keep in for impact is really important, right? Because otherwise,
Right.
like, you've had a lot of horrible shit happen. That if this was like your memoir about like the long list of bad things that have happened, that I think your book could probably be less impactful because the idea is like we want to see, like, we get you don't want to be reading this being like, okay, man, like, we get it, for you, this is horrible.
Yes.
Like, and we can't almost catch a breath. Unfortunately, you had to live that.
Right.
But as the reader, in order to learn from it and in order to like be inspired by it, there are moments that we just have to like omit, not because they're not significant in your life, but because they don't serve the intention of the story.
Exactly. You know, and from the beginning of the book and the end of the book, I do continuously say it could be worse. Because I know that my story is, I mean, I believe everyone has a very interesting story about their life. Every single one of us have I can really give you some juicy details about their life story, you know, and so keeping that into, in consideration, I know other people's story who's a whole lot worse than mine, much worse than mine. So I'm always using that to sort of to cope and realize that it could be a whole lot worse. You know, it could be a whole lot worse. I could have been raped. I've never been raped. I could have been raped by a family member. You know, like it could be worse, you know? So I went through stuff. I talked about how I prevailed, how I overcame, and just encouraging people like, you're not alone. You can get over this. You can move forward and still have a successful, wonderful, decent life.
Yeah, and a story, and in the way that your book is written, it's done in a way that it's not this like, you got this, like, go for it. It's like, you're not,
No.
like, I think we talked about this, as like, this was something really deliberate that you did, was that you give your readers credit. Like, we want to learn, we're reading the memoir part of your book as like to learn about you, but you're not saying like, look at what I did and I'm gonna
exactly.
You're giving the readers the credit and the assuming that they're smart, that they can pull out the pieces of your life that are reflections of their own, right?
Exactly. The whole point is to, honestly, I want people to realize this is something that can resonate with anybody, and it really does. And you can tell from the reviews, it's the same thing, that they could totally relate to it. Everyone seems to find something. I had an Indian friend who read it. She's actually a neighbor of mine, and she said the part when I start talking about my blackness, being that she happens to be one of the Indians who are brown skinned, very dark skinned. And so she talks about that situation and how she could relate to it. So that really pleases me. That makes me so happy that anybody can pick up the book. And I've had men who have also read the book too, and they can grasp things from it, especially when I talk about the business sense and how I, decided to assert myself so that I can be this, have this important role, be of value to an organization, so that regardless of my race and regardless of my gender, they cannot refuse me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm loving this. So in the interest of like ending on a high, because you're a fantastic storyteller, and I think you should just have your own podcast and just riff for hours.
I do now. Did I tell you that? I started my podcast. I started a podcast that I haven't put out because I realized that I say, way too much. I say it so much, I don't realize that I say it that much. And so I'm so critical of myself, and I'm so OCD about my presentation and how I do things. I am such an overachiever. I know. I have issues.
Yes, on other people's podcasts. Don't put together, like, it's too much production to make
but I did. I started it. It's called Get Your Foot Off My Neck. I just started it, but I'm just going to use this opportunity to talk about the focus of that podcast is to highlight on women who are pretty much like me, women in male-dominated industries, and how they thrived, how they were able to overcome bias or sexism. And I also talk to interesting women who are in creative niche markets. Even in finances, so I find that so fascinating. To find other people like me is extremely fascinating to get to talk to them. So I interview them, and I'm not going to do it all the time. Probably once a month. I'm not going to be switched to being a podcaster right now. I really don't have time. There's just no way.
Switch the podcast title to, and then,
yeah, exactly. Then it would be totally normal.
Yeah.
I love that. That's brilliant. Yeah. That's brilliant. I might take that.
Go for it.
Megan, I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, so my one question for you is, since the book has come out and since all of this, like, since you've been, like, the sales have fluctuated and everything's changed, what is the best direct message, like piece of feedback? What is the coolest thing that has happened to you since becoming published?
Oh my God. That's a loaded question. I honestly am just so grateful. I don't know any other way to say this. Just I'm so grateful. The coolest thing that has happened thus far right now is the fact that my book is actually going to be internationally published. So that's a huge, big deal for me. And so now I feel like the doors are opening up just a little bit more to bring awareness. I have a new book cover because I don't want people, because I'm not like a Michelle Obama or something, I'm not Oprah Winfrey or whatever. So my concern is people looking at me and say, oh, it's just a book about her, but I want people to realize it's about everyone. So I decided that the new cover will just be just that powerful message, the title, which is Get Your Foot Off My Neck. And there's no face anymore to it. Of course, they'll look and they'll realize this is about me, but I want it to be for everyone. I want it to be for everyone. And I think another big thing is that it has ignited and accelerated this plan for the Honest Boy Foundation that I'm going to end up creating to just help try to get more people of color in those roles where they can squash, you know, racism and discrimination altogether, right? I want to just try to find a way to get rid of that. So I'm just one tiny little person in this whole tiny little world, a big world, just trying to make a difference, you know?
But you know what? I'm going to be very firm with you and say that your humility is not welcome here. And and I think it's just everything that you've got going on right now is, I think you don't even have to be humble, because all of your action is showing just like how much generosity and like for the greater good you've got. So you don't have to say all of that stuff, because we know.
Go ahead and pat myself on the shoulder and just like, you go, girl.
Yeah.
No, I'm proud of myself, and my family is proud of me, and that just makes me feel like I'm a good role model. I know I'm a good role model. I feel a responsibility to make sure I walk that walk. I have realized that I want to be a mentor more than ever since this book. So I launched my mentorship program for creative entrepreneurs. So yeah, I am doing a lot, but you know, that's what keeps me going. I think that if I'm one of those people who are just sitting down and just focusing on one thing, I feel like it would be so mundane for me. I think I need to do all the things. And I say this in my book, I say this in podcasts, that honestly, the fact that I know that death is inevitable, that is the drive that has me running as hard as I can while I can. Yeah. I'm gonna run as hard as I can until I drop. Okay.
Yeah, and we will, and we will all be the beneficiaries of it. So please don't stop. So.
Thank you, Megan. It was so nice to talk to you.
No, I'm so happy to talk to you, Ola. And I'll link to everything, and then we will we'll cross-pollinate everything. So.
Of course.
Awesome.
You have a good one. Thank you. This is a good one. Thank you so much.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.